Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. Also, check us out on Off the Floor. That's winnow.app. That's with two N's and two P's. Winnow.app/off the floor. Get text directly to your phone from Brady, Alex, Greg, and myself. Bypass Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, and all of the others. Get your information straight from us. You also get special contests and more. Go to winnow.app/off the floor. Also, check out Prize Picks. That's the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Use the code 5, FIVE. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. You play the NFL, MLS, NHL.